Hey everyone, this is John Puritz. Welcome to the Man Up Already podcast. This show is dedicated to each of us being better in all areas of our lives, mentally, spiritually, physically, and relationally. We want to help you be a better you because when you man up already, the world around you is greatly impacted. Here on the podcast, we don't believe you're an accident. We believe each of us is created for purpose, and this show is dedicated to helping you discover and live out that purpose. Again, welcome to the show, and let's check out another great episode. All right, hey everyone, welcome back. Welcome to the Man Up Already podcast. Super pumped and excited to have you here for another great episode. And man, I tell you, first off, I can't believe how fast this year's going, and just the better. It just keeps getting better and better here on the show more than ever. It's exciting. The guests that we're having. This episode is every week I say the same thing, and yet somebody shows up and I know is just going to kill it. It's going to be this episode as well. I want to remind everyone post Man Up Already Growth Conference that manupalready.com is the hub for everything, and I'm excited to announce that growth conference, having been fully recorded, will be up on that website in just a few days, where you can sign in there, purchase it, get all 5 hours, all the speakers, all of their notes. It's all made available, and I highly recommend. If you're a man, right, get that. But I said it when it came to the event, and I understood people, couldn't, logistically where they were location-wise get to that event. But now there's no excuse. It is online, and if you're a woman, get that and watch it with your man, because there's a lot of good things in there that I know will impact both men and women. So get to manupalready.com, and there's so much more good stuff happening on there. All the podcast episodes will be up there, so it's all going to be one site for everything happening. And then coming soon will be the Man Up Already Mastermind, which is going to be a lot of fun to take that conference and journey with men in group moving forward. So there's a lot of great things happening in this movement. But today, I really want to bring up our guest. I don't want to take any of his time in really getting to it. Super pumped. Our guest today is the host of the Create Your Own Life podcast. He's the author of Unremarkable to Extraordinary. Man, that title doesn't make you want to go out and get that book. I don't know what does. That's such a great title. Unremarkable to Extraordinary. He's a husband. He's a father. He's co-founder of Command Your Brand, a public relations agency. I have checked this dude out. I can't wait to get to know him more and have you all hear from him. Please welcome to the Man Up Already podcast, Jeremy Ryan Slate. Jeremy, thanks so much for being here, dude.
Hey, John, I'm stoked to be here, spend some time with you. My coffee I made before this is like a little strong, so I might be overly wired during this conversation. So we're going to see how this goes, man.
Wired works here, man. Wired works, right? How you show up is how you show up, and it'll be a lot of fun. So, we were just talking beforehand that we're kind of on that same trajectory, and I love how, kind of things work. And one of my big hammering points in, a key kind of foundation to what I call the Man Up Already movement is the power of your posse, right? Like you really are a product of the people that you surround yourself with. And a lot of guys ask me, man, how do I do that? And, I think the more you grow and the more you're deliberate about who you have around you, you attract people that kind of think the same way or might be on the same mission. And I really do think this is case in point.
Yeah, I figured this out the hard way, but you don't really attract people who agree with you or have kind of the same worldview as you if you're vanilla, right? Like it becomes very hard to, I guess, kind of find your people if you're not willing to kind of say what you believe and be very certain in that. So it's something I've experienced, especially through 2020 and kind of a lot of the BS and things like that we've experienced since then. So for me, being more outspoken about a lot of those things has actually helped me find more of my people and take a lot of what I talk about in private and make it very public.
Yeah, that's really great. It's funny because I was just before our time together here, I was mentoring a young guy. He's 22. And I said, the thing that you've got to realize is you've got to do the hard things. You've got to have the hard conversations and face the confrontation or be confrontational, because typically on the other side of that is good things. Mm-hmm. you know what I mean, of having those difficult things or saying those things or taking a stand, especially in the world today. I think good things happen on the other side of that in a world where we're led to believe to shut up and or you might be canceled and all that other crap.
Well, I think also a lot of us get pulled into the wrong arguments. Like we all get pulled into the political argument. When if you actually look at it, it's actually politics is downstream of culture, right? Like a lot of the disagreements we're having are actually cultural issues and things that, you know, we need to handle culture wise. But we're kind of fighting red team, blue team, and kind of the political realm of things. When actually that doesn't solve anything, it's the culture that gets solved. Like I know I had seen Tucker Carlson had put in a video not long ago about taboos, right? And taboos are kind of those things that are acceptable and not acceptable in society. And if you change a society's taboos, you can change a society without ever changing the laws. And I think that's why when you look at it, politics is downstream from culture. We actually need to be having these real world cultural conversations. Those are the things that actually do anything.
Yeah, it's so dead on. And where, unfortunately, right, those conversations are today the lines are being drawn. Like if you open up your mouth and you want to have the conversation, you're labeled, oh, you're a conservative or you're a liberal, or and where it's no, I'm a human being, right, with some legitimate concerns about what's happening around me. You know?
I would agree there, because if you look at it, like people would look at me and say, "Oh, you're a conservative, you're a Republican," when the mainline Republican Party actually doesn't want me. So I think really you have to look at what things matter most to me, what things matter most to my family, and my family doing well. And I think for a lot of us, that's how you really should be able to kind of define what matters to you.
Yeah, it's really great. So I want, obviously our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So I'd love to hear just your story, maybe the highlights of it.
Yeah.
We were chatting a little bit before, but you had a background in education, and then shortly there realized that wasn't where you wanted to be, I guess. And so kind of walk us through, a little bit of your story, if you would.
It was a very small background in education. It's it's like when people ask you if you speak Spanish, you're like, hablo un poquito español.
That's more than I could do, right? Right? That's you're way more ahead than I am. Right
un poquito, just a little bit. But I think when you look at it, for me, I was somebody that I've always kind of been, high energy. I've been a smart kid growing up, and I actually struggled a lot with school because of that. In first and second grade, I'd finish my work like really, really fast. And then I would kind of figure out how I could create some trouble. And I got kicked out of kindergarten for singing Friends in Low Places by Garth Brooks. So I was just a wild kid, but I was a really smart kid. And so what happened is they basically just gave me more work to keep me busy. And I realized that was dumb and I wasn't going to do it. So they said to my parents, listen, we have to talk about hyperattention, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because your son apparently has that. Mind you, the teacher and the principal, no doctor of any kind diagnosed me with this. They had a meeting with my parents. They're like, so he's probably going to have to go on a prescription drug of some sort if he wants to stay here. And my parents were like, yeah, that's not happening. So they ended up putting me in private school. And the issue is, number one, my parents couldn't afford it. But number two, if you don't start your life in private school, you never really fit in. Right? Because you didn't start with those kids.
Right.
So I actually had to develop a lot of other skills, I guess what you would call soft skills, because I wasn't part of that group. I had to learn how to sell better, communicate better, do a lot of these things better because I wasn't accepted. So fast forward, that brings me into somebody that's always kind of had an entrepreneurial mindset. I had a paper route at 11. I took it from 85 customers to 235 customers by the time I let it go 7 years later. And I really started teaching because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't explore what I wanted to do. My parents really badly wanted me to be a teacher. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I can do that. So I got an undergrad degree in Catholic theology, and I got my master's degree in ancient history. And if you want to teach in a private school here in New Jersey, you don't need any sort of credentials. They just kind of lock you in a room with 40 kids and say good luck. So number one, this wasn't something I had really explored, do I want to do? But number two, I didn't have any formal training on what to do with it. And there's a lot of value in understanding, how do you handle all these kids? And mind you, I was an only child, by the way, as well. So I didn't have these skills of becoming a dad was really important for me because it taught me how to deal with children, which I did not have when I was a teacher. So I burnt out really quick. I burnt out in 2 years because I'm like, I don't want to do this, man. I'm not happy here. My mom ended up having a stroke in 2012. It made me look at a lot of different things I was doing and realizing I got to do something different. I don't know what it was. First thing for me was network marketing. Didn't like it though I made some money because it really changed a lot of my social interactions and things like that in a way I didn't like. Went from there to selling life insurance, sold products on Amazon. Finally started a podcast just as a hobby in 2015, just as like an outlet for myself. Took off. We had 10,000 listens in our first month.
Wow.
And that led to us starting the company in 2016. It's kind of just where we've been going from there, man.
That's awesome. There's the, we talk about it all the time here and in anything that we do, right? Success leaves clues, right? And everybody's going to face adversity at some point, right? Like it just shows up, right? Like, all right, I'm an only kid. I don't want to talk about the wild kid, quote unquote, comment. But it's all right. There's the difference between looking at things as I'm disadvantaged or how do I use this scenario and how do I level up to make what I want happen? And life really is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You can't control what happens, but you certainly can control how you react to it and what you do next.
Yes. I think for a lot of people, they have a strange viewpoint of it, of like that life is all these things that like happens to them. And they're kind of like just experiencing life as it hits them. And a lot of times you have to realize, I feel like it's been said too much, but life kind of isn't a spectator sport. It's your involvement in it and how you control it and how you handle it. And there's a lot of situations you may say there's nothing I can do about it. And sure, there are some, natural disasters and things like that. But I would still say there's something you can do about those, right? Like you could move, you could, prepare your house for it. You could do anything. So at the same time, like we always have a causative point in every single thing we're doing. You could be a situation where you look at a communication and be like, all right, like I'm right in the situation, but would being right in the situation cause the person to be more angry? You get what I'm saying? That we always have a causative point in every single thing we're doing. But I think we've been taught, it's so much of what happens to you and it's not your fault and you're a victim and whatever it may be. And that's not empowering because you can't do anything about that if it's somebody else's problem and not yours.
You shared with me you're just shy of 40, correct?
Yeah, I'm 36.
Perfect. Okay. So this is I really would love to have this conversation. So I'm Gen X, right? And Gen X was,
I'm technically a millennial, but I don't fit with the rest of my generation. Like I think I should have been the generation before, but anyway, continue.
No, that's why we're going to have the conversation, right? Because Gen X was like, I attribute to a lot that Gen X does and how we think we grew up with be home before dark.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in that statement because it was personal responsibility, that you were given a lot more. I mean, it all really falls under responsibility. You learned a lot of that just by, I've got to interact with others. I've got to, take responsibility for where I am, when I need to be home, right? I may come home and nobody's home. And how do I navigate that? There was a lot of responsibility that bred maturity that as I watched our generation grow up and deal with the technology changes that we've seen, we've handled it a certain way. And the thing that I've noticed and why I started the Man Up Already, movement that I have is the younger generation's technology has kind of made excuses for that. So being your age, how do you see, just the change in maybe, generational culture or what's happening around you in regards to that victim mind?
Well, what's interesting though, too, is I think also a big part of it is trying to think of a way to put this, like the feminization of society in a lot of ways. Like gender roles have changed drastically where a lot of what we're dealing with now comes from more of a feminine viewpoint, which can be a little bit more passive, a little bit more laid back and things like that. And we've been told like, hey, it's not good to be, manly, and it's not good to be, aggressive and things like that. And I think actually a lot of what we're seeing in this time period is we're seeing children that were this isn't a mean thing to women, but they were, born of women, schooled by women. They've been brought into to some of these, psychology and some of these other things that once again doesn't really empower people. And so I think we've seen kind of gender roles and control of society actually like really flip things and actually need a really good balance of, kind of the masculine and the feminine. That's why like when you look at the family, it's really important to have kind of that, very masculine role, but also that very feminine role. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that we're really seeing. I think we're suffering from in society now.
Yeah, big time. That's such a great point that it's, and it's the thing that I think has been a really eye opener for me is the feminization of our culture over a long period of time. I had learned recently that from a good friend of mine who's a chiropractor and a health and wellness lunatic. He's amazing.
Sounds like my kind of a person.
Yeah, how estrogen is in our food.
Well, that's one of the biggest things. I had interviewed. Gosh, I'm trying to remember his name now. He's a cancer doctor. But anyway, we were talking about one of the biggest issues that we're actually dealing with. Like these incense candles and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of like synthetic hormones and things like that, and even stuff like that. Like we're taking in. Everything's in plastic now, right? Plastic, the BPAs and things like that. And plastic a lot of times, can cause hormonal issues. So like a lot of what we're seeing is, number one, just like how the home has changed, right? Like, women have to come out of the home and work because that's what society asks for now. But we're also seeing like these chemicals and things like that going into our bodies that shouldn't really be there.
Hmm. Which would help for those that are, especially women that maybe are going, why is my husband doing what he's doing? Or, I wish he would X, Y, Z, because I hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. And the answer is maybe he is unaware, one, of what's happening. You know what I mean? Like there's some things happening chemically that he's not even aware of it. You know what I mean?
That's why dietary changes can be such a big deal, right? Like, and even like, just working out can raise your testosterone drastically, even if you're not hardcore at it. And that can also change your way of being. I know for me personally, one of the biggest changes in my life is I became a competitive powerlifter in my 20s, but like in my teenage years, I started working out at 16, 17, 18 years old. And that was a big difference for me because number one, it was something I could accomplish. But number two, it does drastically change your hormonal balances and it does drastically change your body composition.
And we're going to talk about it because we're just here on it. Like the one thing that has been a game changer for me, and I've tried to hack it for years, is sleep.
Yeah.
And I gotta, and I'm really on the bandwagon on this right now. And I not last year, but the year before that, I had been in front of somebody who was like thumping the drum on this. I did a sleep study and then got a CPAP machine. And most people look at me and go, you're fit, you don't have apnea. But I did. Mm. And that machine has changed my life.
Wow.
Right? It's changed every aspect of it because I went from what I thought was a hormonal or a genetically depressed state into literally seeing the fatigue leave me so that I'm clear-headed, I'm more even, emotionally, so my relationships are better. I'm better in how I function. I mean, sleep is a major, major component to a successful life in all areas.
Yeah. And it's funny because my wife's joke about me was, you don't sleep, you go into a coma, apparently every night. But I will tell you right now, I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. So like, I am very much suffering from lack of sleep, usually because sometime around like between 2 and 4 a.m. they end up in my bed. With my wife. So you can imagine, we only have a queen size bed, by the way, too. So it's not huge. So you can imagine 2 small children plus the 2 of us plus a dog. So it gets, I
know those days well.
It gets to be a little too much. Like I was a great sleeper before kids. So now I'm just kind of figuring it out. But at the same time, I know I'm going to miss it once they get bigger. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, it is sleep is a big deal. So I want to go back.
Yeah.
Because, and I remember being in college. It was either part of my master's in teaching program or my bachelor's program, but I had to do a research paper on ADHD. So this is back early 90s, right? And our son, Ethan, when he was born, we had to leash him. Like we literally had a harness on him and because he was just all over the place. And I remember saying,
sounds like a kid after my own heart.
Yeah, they would label him, right? But he was nothing of the kind, right? It's just being a boy. John Eldridge in the book Wild at Heart does an amazing talk on that. But I think you and I are both fans of Grant Cardone. I think he was on your podcast. And I remember Grant talking one time saying, somebody made a comment like, man, you can't focus. And his response was, I would if you would be more interesting.
That's great.
And how often are we so quick to label kids and then, right, it goes back to let's throw estrogen around like crazy,
Yeah.
but also let's medicate them instead of what does this person need? What, instead of labeling, what is the root or what's happening underneath, and let's actually talk about that real issue.
Well, there's a couple different parts to that. I think one of it is, I'm sorry to say this because I know you were a teacher for 10 years, but our school system as it's put together, I think it kind of sucks the way it's put together.
Dude, we homeschooled both our children.
Okay, cool.
So there you go.
I'm homeschooling as well. So
there you go.
I don't know how gentle I have to be on some of those.
You don't have to be gentle at all, man. Not at all.
So if you look at kind of how our school system is put together, the model it's based on kind of the melding of two different models. The first is the Austro-Hungarian model, and that was built off of making soldiers in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is kind of like right before World War I.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it in our country, it was kind of the Industrial Revolution. So what do we need? A lot of people to do a lot of automated work, not really think a lot and do a lot of things. So you take something in, you regurgitate it. Cool. It looks like you know how to shut that machine off and hopefully not cut your fingers off. Like that was the purpose of our education system. It wasn't built for people to learn how to build a business, have higher level ideas, things like that. And what you find is it's not really super engaging because every single kid learns on a different pace because they have different abilities, they have different things they're good at, they may hit misunderstood words, they may have all these different things they got to deal with. So like I think in general, the way we educate is a really big problem. And I will tell you, like I remember I was kind of that, like, I don't know how to explain this, like experimental teaching generation. Like when I went to school, they're like, so we're going to teach you about something called context clues. You're going to look at the word before it and the word after it. It's going to tell you what that one in the middle means. And you find out most of the time it's wrong when they actually should have just had you like look the word up in a good dictionary. So like, we've really messed with language and things like that. And we have to look at is getting education back to something that really can help somebody produce something, right? I'm a big believer in trade schools and tech schools and things like that because people learn a task and they can do it. We're also missing something called apprenticeships, like the ability to work for somebody in a career and see, do I like this? Can I get some training at it? Can I do it? I think that's a big part of it. But then going back to what you were saying before, have you ever looked at what the actual symptoms of ADHD are? You could actually take away the words ADHD and just put childhood on top. They'd be like, oh, you're displaying the symptoms of childhood. We should handle this. But I think like if we take a look at, we have to channel that energy better, right? Because if I look at it, I look at a lot of my friends that were put on those drugs as kids, and they were either nobody home in high school then because they were their everything was kind of beat out of them, or they had a drug problem later on because they wanted more speed. So like, I just think we have to learn how to work with our kids better. And I don't think drugging them is the solution. They should have less sugar. They should have less dyes. They should have a lot less things in their body. And our education system really needs some help, man, because we should be channeling people to be smarter, not lagging behind countries like China and all these other ones because we're caring too much about social emotional learning and rather than actually producing a product.
Yeah, no, it's
that was a mouthful.
No. I mean, it's dead on. And, I speak and teach from experience. So I was programmed, if you look at the cash flow quadrant from Robert Kiyosaki, and the first time I saw that,
Sure.
like I thought it was just radical and it is so dead on. And that book is such a great book because each quadrant is a mindset. Well, I was raised in the first quadrant. I was raised by employees, right? Like
me too.
That was the paradigm that was created. So to not go to school, to not get good grades, to not get a good job was just unheard of. And we did that, my wife and I, for 10 years, only at 33 to wake up and go, this is not what success is supposed to look like, right? This is not the pot at the end of the rainbow is a myth. It actually, this is a nightmare. And so we made the change and started the process of getting out of that quadrant, being self-employed, and then building a business and all that. Mm-hmm. But I share all that to say that, again, success leaves clues. And I say all the time, success is built on a chassis. That when you meet people who have learned that and go through the process, it's a different paradigm. It's a different way of thinking. You learn to take control, take ownership. Right? If somebody's going to educate my kids, it's going to be us because that's the only way I can guarantee that we're going to figure out who they were created to be. Like all of these things connect. And just listening to the mass mindset is not going to get you where you need to be.
Well, and a lot of people kind of complain about cultural issues we're dealing with, and it actually comes back to the home, right? Like you mentioned homeschooling, like early education comes from the home. Morals and values that you create come from your home. How your kids treat each other come from your home. And I think a lot of people, we just want to give the responsibility for training our kids and handling our kids to someone else and then complain that we don't like them in 10 years. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think you have to, it's, I know my kids are younger, but at the same time, I look at how my parents raised me, and they raised me the exact same way I'm raising my kids. Like, you got to take responsibility, man.
Yeah, well, and it's that right there. Let's dive into it because I know where we're going to go. But when we're here in Florida, I know you're in New Jersey,
surviving in New Jersey. But
it's kind of like, all right, the school district is teaching this, and my answer is, well, excuse my language, get them the fuck out of the class. Just pull them out. You figure it out. What's more important? You know what I mean? You got to decide what's important. And some people are like, well, that's really hard. But everything is a decision, right? We work where we work based on a decision, right?
Yeah.
Our children, right, are especially when they're young, I don't know. Like, I just, the extreme ownership responsible person to me goes, well, if I don't like what's happening, then we change it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult too, because I think it also doesn't really matter what state you're in as well. And I don't know, maybe you could answer this for me too, because you went to school for education, but like the colleges of education have changed big time too. Did they have you read any Paulo Freire in school?
No, so, we're talking 30 years now.
Okay, so because what happened in the 80s is there was this, and it would have been the 80s and the early 90s, and a lot of what we're dealing with now. There was this Brazilian philosopher named Paulo Freire. And what he actually did is he's kind of the father of social emotional learning, or a lot of the stuff we're dealing with now. So they have this idea called generative conversations, meaning the student is also the teacher, which is kind of strange. But what they do is they, rather than solving a math problem, you're finding out how people feel about the math problem or how this makes other people feel. So what happens is you have kind of, through these colleges of education in the 80s, Marxism kind of came into our education system. So it really doesn't quite matter what school district you're in. And that's, to me, that's why I'm terrified of public schools, where I'm kind of like, I'm just going to do this at home, because you can have some very well-intentioned people that might just be the education they experience, right? So now they're just passing it on. Yeah,
no, I don't remember that.
It's not everywhere. It wasn't everywhere during that time. Yeah. Now it's everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, for sure. So let's dive into, right, you're 36, husband, father, you've got a lot of, success under your belt in what you're doing. But I know that in your podcast, for sure, I've seen conversations like, let's just talk about manhood today, and just what you're seeing, what your thoughts are. That seems to be the thing. I don't know. It's a pressing issue, right? It's certainly for me. I know that being 53 at this time and having experienced what I've experienced, I can't be quiet, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's just important. Yes. Family unit, family structure. You don't get masculinity from femininity. Mm-hmm. So, and you have a wife and 2 daughters, right? Yeah. They need you, mm-hmm. right? Because you are it. You are the example of manhood in your home.
And I think that's been the really difficult thing, is I think there's been kind of this weird swing in society right now, of like, men are bad and, down with the patriarchy and all these different things. And I think what you have to actually look at is, and people get really upset about this, but like gender roles are important, right? Like, a kid needs a mother and a kid needs a father because they get those examples in their lives. But I think what's happened is, we've said that, men are bad and men need to be more feminine and they need to be this way and that way. And I think it's also gone too far the other way, because there's some of these influencers that come from a perspective of, I'm a man and and like, it's like, okay, that's kind of ridiculous. But I think if you look at it, you have to look at like, what would a real man do? A real man would, want morals in his house, would want, some sort of spirituality in the home, would take care of. And I think that's really important when you look at it. The man is supposed to take care of and provide. And I think that's really important, and take responsibility for. And a lot of times you look at it and, historically, like the ideal of like, what is a man, is like more of that, like, solemn John Wayne type figure, somebody that, speaks up when need be, but just takes responsibility for family and doesn't really start stuff. To me, that's what I think is one of the biggest things missing in manliness is we're just missing that kind of father figure that takes responsibility for the group because we've been told that's wrong, which is really strange to me.
Yeah, one of the things that triggered at 33, I reference it a lot, is the book Wild at Heart, because John Eldredge talks in that book that every man, and this is for me, the mission I'm on, is every man is wired by God with three things, which is a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue, and an adventure to live. It's wired inside of us, right? Like from the very little, right? You don't have to put a gun in a little boy's hand. He's going to make one. He's going to make a weapon. He wants to fight. It's just innate, right? And that's our protective nature, right? These things are innate, and they come from, at least in my opinion, right? It is my podcast. It's a divine placement. And yes. I really do find that when you attack manhood and the removal of the patriarchy, like you're talking about, it is an assault on the divine order of things. Men want to provide, they want to protect, right? It's just part of who we are. But if the programming is, well, you're going to fail at that, right? If it's coming from our spouse, if it's coming from society, if that is the message that no, don't do that, that's bad, or you're going to fail if you do, then men will go inside and just cave there and not say a word, and then people wonder why they're checked out.
Well, I think too, like there's also like, and this goes both ways. There's like also allowing the other person to be, if that makes sense. Like one of the things that was, I appreciated this so much. I was talking to my wife about this morning. I was like, the thing I always appreciated so much about my wife is like every woman I dated before my wife tried to change me and make me somebody I wasn't. My wife has always loved me for me and appreciated the things about me. And that's why she's always been interested in me. And I think too, like, I've always opened the door for her, and I've always, taken her out on a date and done these different things. And we still do. It's to me, like, there's kind of this weird thing where you say, I can open my own door, or I can do these own things. And that's great. But the thing you have to understand is that's granting respect. And that's also granting, I'm trying to think of the right word, like honor to my wife, right? Like, or honor to, my girlfriend at that point in time. And I think we've lost that. We've lost kind of that chivalry in a relationship. And I think that's just so important because like so much of that builds off of that and builds off the respect and builds off what kids see. And it's just, we don't have that anymore. And it's like, it doesn't allow a man to truly be a man if he can't be chivalrous,
Yeah, no, do you ever see A Bronx Tale?
I've heard the name many times. I've never seen it, believe it or not.
Oh my gosh, you got to see that movie for the simple thing called The Test. Okay. You got to watch that. There's a scene in there where the older guy is mentoring the younger guy, and he says, the kid's like, is she like the one? And the guy goes, well, you got to give her the test. And he's like, what's the test? And the test was, I'd love to share it with you, but I'll ruin that scene. But that test is exactly what you're talking about. Like it's a respect for both male and female, and it's such a freaking unbelievable scene.
Yeah, because I think like what happens is like there's like this idea behind it of like, oh, that's saying, a woman can't do those things or do whatever. Like, dude, my wife can use a freaking chainsaw and she can use an axe and she can do all these other things. But you know what? She loves that I kind of grant her the respect of doing certain things for her as her husband. And I think that's just really important,
Agreed. It's funny that we talk about this. Tomorrow will be 26 years for my wife and I.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And that's marriage, and the length of it is hard fought because I really believe society, especially in a social media driven world, wants to rip traditional marriage apart.
Well, we've been together for like 15, and then we've been married for almost 9 now. So it's been a bit, yeah. Yeah.
So there's after when you're with the beauty of a really solid marriage is what you talked about. Like my wife is the only person who knows me for who I truly am, right? She's been laying next to me for 26 years. She puts up right with the snoring and now a mask on my face. And, but there is a respect that's built in that relationship about understanding who that person is, good and bad, and how that relationship is built and how they tick. And, I know, right? Me putting flowers on the table for my wife is a big, big freaking deal. Yeah. Right? So I love being able to go out and do that for, right? As a man. And if you look just from a manhood perspective, I like the fact that I can go out and get flowers at will because we built a business that allows me to do things like that without looking over my shoulder on what are we spending money on. And I remember the days when we did.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But there's a process to things, and there's a pride that comes from being able to do those things.
Well, and I think also it's recognizing that marriage is a real partnership, right? Like I think like for my wife and I, like we're in this together, right? Like, and I think that's really important for a lot of people that may not be the case, right? Like, because maybe they're in it for something else. I don't know. And we also have ground rules to our relationship, what, because we don't really fight. We have some very pointed conversations, but it's not, we don't fight about things because we have an agreement between us where we say whatever we think needs to be said without the intention to hurt the other person. Right. And I think sometimes people, they don't even care about winning. They just want to hurt the other person verbally because they feel like they'll win the argument. You ever watched the TV show Yellowstone?
Yeah.
There's a meme with the guy that always wears the sunglasses. But
Rip.
There's a meme with Rip on it, and it said, "I know I lost the argument 10 minutes ago. I'm just trying to piss you off now." But I think there's people that really are like that in a relationship, and that's not a partnership, right? Like you have to be willing to work things out, but you also have to be willing to say what needs to be said in order to solve a situation.
Agreed. And unfortunately, right, those skills are they're either not taught or not modeled, right? Mm-hmm. But they're so important. There's so much to hear, dude, that we could really do a 3-hour podcast on all these little things. We'll talk about like kind of what you're after right now. What's your mission? You're up to a bunch of cool things.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like I'm playing the game of what I can say on YouTube and putting the stuff I really can't say on Rumble right now. But like, that's kind of the game we're playing. But for me, I'm really about talking about cultural issues and trying to really go at our cultural problems. Because if you look at it, like, as I said, fighting about politics and these other things is neither here nor there. And we're not going to solve anything by saying red team, blue team, I don't know, whatever colors we have in between that. But like, I think we have to really take a look at what are the cultural issues that matter to us. So I'm really having those conversations. I'm also having conversations about, things I think are really important. Like, why aren't we looking at nuclear energy and why aren't we doing some of these things? So I want to empower people and have them walking away, like not only having more information, but actually like, knowing the false information out there and knowing what they can actually take responsibility for in their lives. That's for me, that's what I'm doing on a daily basis and trying to really just make people feel more positive in their life.
And so the ways that you're doing that, I mentioned it at the top. So you have your own podcast, Create Your Own Life, right? Mm-hmm. You're actively posting on that. Is that like a weekly podcast or?
It's 2 days a week. And then we have like, on our YouTube channel, we'll have different like teasers and material that come out like, 5 days a week. So there's that. There's also the agency where we're really trying to support people that have really big messages, but also a lot of our clients are people that have been canceled in some way because I think they have a really important message to get out there. So to me, like, I think we really are in the midst of a culture war. And if, I need to put kind of my money and my business and everything where my mouth is and kind of really push. And that's really what I've been trying to do is support what I think needs to be supported in kind of this cultural revolution we're going through at the moment.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so glad that we connected. It's funny because I had a friend of mine who I hadn't spoken to in a little while, and he called me up. He goes, I was thinking about manhood, and your name popped up in my mind. Like I had to call you, and I'm like, all right, good. The message is getting out there. Like we're starting to get connected to the movement. So I love what you're doing. Talk about your book, Unremarkable to Extraordinary. I love the freaking title, right? I'd grab that book in a second, which I will. But if you could talk about a little bit about that as well.
Well, it goes along with a lot of what we've been talking about today. I've had over 1,000 conversations in the last 8 years of, the podcast and those other stuff I've been doing. And I'm not a big believer in the theoretical. I'm the big believer in seeing exactly how somebody's done it, exactly how they've done it in their lives, and exactly how they've implemented. So that's really what I've looked at as there's 12 different principles in the book that come from actually people's blood, sweat, and tears of things that they've done. I had a 4-time Indy 500 champion that's in the book. I have a former CAA director. I have a couple World Series champions in the book. Like, what are the things they learn, apply, and do in their lives so they can actually move forward? Because I think people think that success is this thing that one day you're just going to keep going, you're going to find it. And what it actually comes down to is it's hard work and applying the same things again and again and again until it works out for you. And when you lose, learning from that to figure out how to not lose again. So these are really things that you can apply work in your life and actually get somewhere with it. Like, I'm just not a big believer in, look at yourself in the mirror 5 times and say whatever, and then you're going to be successful. It's about hard work. It's about work. It's about integrity. And that's what people can really get out of this book.
I love it. I love it. It's so proof, dude, that success is a code. It really, you know what I mean? It really is. It's there are things that if you apply, it's not a question of if, it's just when, right?
Yes.
And when is different for everyone,
100%.
depending on how you start.
100%. 100%. I think like Tom Brady is a great example of that. I don't know if you're, I'm a Packers fan, so I feel like I'm allowed to talk about Tom Brady. But like, my dad's a Giants fan, so you can't really say that.
I'm a Giants fan. Yeah,
okay,
I'm a big time Giants fan.
My dad's a Giants fan, so you can't talk about Tom Brady in front of him. But if you look at it, like, he's a guy that didn't start till a senior in high school. He competed with Drew Henson, who was the Yankees third baseman for a little bit, back and forth for, who's going to be the starter senior year at college. Gets drafted in the 6th round, only plays because Drew Bledsoe literally almost dies on the field after Mo Lewis hits him. So, like, if you look at it like hard work,
Yep.
studying, film, because he doesn't have a big arm. He runs like he's got a piano on his back. So, like, you just got to keep showing up, man, and keep preparing for when that time comes.
Yeah, it's funny. I did not develop an appreciation of that dude until I saw the Brady 6.
That was a great series.
That
yeah,
was just wow.
Yeah.
And it's proof, right? So and he showed up and he went to the owner of the Patriots and was pretty much like, you don't know me now, but you will. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, the guy was crying in the hallway for not getting drafted.
Mr. Kraft, I'm Tom Brady, and I'm the best decision you ever made.
Right? Yeah. Right. And the ingredients to that is something that I talk about all the time is authenticity. Like, you've got to know who you are, and you've got to show up as who you are.
Yes.
That's one of the pillars of what we talk about. So, I got to cut our time, but this has been fun, man. Like, we got to do this again. I just feel like we scratching the surface.
Yeah, I feel like there's like 5 episodes of things we could go down the rabbit hole on here. So I've just really enjoyed being here today, man.
So Jeremy, thank you. Really, like, I really do appreciate you being on. I just feel like, there's so much synergy between us. I also always like to ask our guests, what is the best way that people can connect with you?
Well, I think really the best thing to do would be, to dive into my book, which they can get over at getextraordinarybook.com. That's going to be the best place that they can do that and really kind of get themselves moving forward, man.
Awesome. Well, I highly encourage people to find you, and you're easily foundable. So you've been an absolute pleasure to have on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
Hey, John, I appreciate it, man.
All right, man. It's always such an honor to have such incredible guests here on the podcast. And the podcast just wouldn't be what it is without our great sponsor, Master Beef Jerky. Head on over to masterbeefjerky.com. Check out their product. It is really incredible beef jerky if you're a fan like we are. It's made here in the USA. It's handcrafted. There's no MSG. It's low in fat. It's gluten-free. It's just freaking good. Their motto is bold flavor, tender bite, and they've got flavors like their original. They've got smoked barbecue, Korean barbecue, Western teriyaki, sweet and spicy, mango and pineapple, carne asada, garlic pepper, a Carolina Reaper flavor, and black pepper. It is good stuff. Head on over to masterbeefjerky.com, and on your order, if you put in coupon code MUAP, you will get 20% off. Master Beef Jerky, bold flavor, tender bite, and a great sponsor of the podcast.